Hey Internet! Today we completed our third month of 30 minis in 30 days. Alright, so I am actually super happy and amazed that I have stuck with it for the 90 days. I plan on continuing to painting and making videos, obviously, but just kind of getting to that first start, that first couple months of painting. And I'm still super noob at it, but I'm not terrified of it anymore. So now it's experiment time, and that should hopefully be a fun time in video for you guys, because now I have a grasp of some of the basic techniques, and I can start experimenting with what those can look like. So we started off, and I think in this month especially, so our first month was just sort of like getting out of our own way as far as just being afraid to do art and afraid to do painting. And then the second month was, I felt like I went backwards because I was trying some of these beginner techniques, and while I was in practicing, the outcomes were still looking pretty rudimentary. So towards the end of this month, though, I have a couple that actually look like they're supposed to be what they're painted as, so that's a plus. And here we go. So our first miniature is a board game miniature from the Yashima series, and it was the one that we drew from the Big Bucket of Random for our second challenge, one of our second or third challenge, the two-tone challenge. So blue and white. I loved the way that the skull turned out with this, but this ultimately came down to being pretty much a complete accident for everything I like about it. That's just sort of the way the paint fell with the washing and the dry brushing and things. So, and then we actually did a video separate for this whole blob of treasure. We did a treasure and terrain Tuesday. We're gonna start doing that, and this 30 days minis will be more and more where there's not terrain featured because the terrain is getting its own videos. But we essentially painted up a bunch of metal and plastic treasure that I had from several different Kickstarters, and then these next ones I did last minute, really fast, just on the way out the door to a holiday themed Dungeons and Dragons game. I have these because I have a little mold, and so every time I work with the plastic, I pour one of these boxes, so I have handfuls of them lying around, and so I painted up 5 of them in the gunmetal green. And then another piece of terrain here, we've got our kegs ready to go for the tavern. And the tavern is probably going to be one of the first dioramas that I eventually assemble from the different things that I'm painting. And we've got that big castle set up now, so that can be the floors and walls for one of our first dioramas to be the tavern. And if you remember back to my first 30 days video, my very first miniature that I painted at the very beginning in October was a bar patron holding a mug, and so that would be cool to come full circle and have him feature in our first diorama. We have got the first, this is the second Hellhound. The first one I think was fleshy and was in the last series. This one was really fun to make because essentially this was my attempt at double loading the brush, so putting yellow and red together and then just kind of smearing them across the miniature, and it turned out so cool. This isn't a miniature, this is a mug, but I did paint it, so I put it in the series, and this turned into a really great tip jar, so I take this with me when I go into new places to be a dungeon master, etc. And then we've got a terrain piece from the dungeon crate. So most every terrain almost every piece of terrain that I have comes from the dungeon crate because I don't afford to buy it myself. So the group pitches in, sometimes the D&D groups, to go after certain Kickstarters, and that's what we did to get most of the terrain and lots of the castle building stuff. Here's another one with that double loaded idea, and this is the twin counterpart to the ice caster that was in the previous round. So this was again a 3D print, misprint, and this one is actually missing the arm on the back there. But I like the idea of the characters, some of them having stories to tell or battles that took a toll. So this is one of those little tiny 16mm board game sprue pieces, and so it was really hard to get the paint to stick to this kind of plastic, including the primer. It didn't want to prime, and so there's a couple more in this group that were me just wrestling with the minis. And as far as this one goes, really it's the amount of minutes I spent on it, mostly just the back. The tail is kind of where the actual painting happened there. This is the other miniature besides the very first one I painted that came with a Dwarven Forge set of castle building pieces, and I really like how the pink battle coloration on the face turned out. A couple more pieces from Terrain Crate. This was also to get ready on that castle that we built to have the courtyard be able to be a training ground. So coming soon, we haven't painted up the sparring dummies, but we got a couple of the archery pieces done here. This is another one of those 16mm pieces, and this one was actually inspired by Chompi. And Chompi, another YouTuber, made this big table piece, phenomenal artwork. I'll put the link in the description. But so I was like, oh, I'll just paint one up that's gold and a dragon, and this one I think is the Scandinavian dragon, and hence the antlers. I wasn't really sure how to handle those. They look a little detached from the miniature. But these ones are harder to paint because they're very, very small and there's not a lot of detail on them. Alright, so this was a piece of brown plastic terrain from Terrain Crate, and I like how this was an attempt at the weathering that leather or faux leather has on seating that's antique. And so that's what kind of the Minnie Mouse stippling with the light pink is, or the peach there on the chair. This guy is Hill Giant from Stonehaven Miniatures, and this was our next challenge video, which by now is the 4th one, I think. And basically the challenge was just to paint a larger mini, because almost everything that I do is in 28mm scale, and this was a challenge. It really was hard to capture light on a big miniature like this, so this one was actually a challenge for that challenge. This was probably the most frustrated I have been painting yet. Another one of these little 16mm miniatures, and it just would not take paint, and the base wouldn't take paint, and you can see the brown is pulling away from the green on the top, and I just had a heck of a time. That one and this one, although this one I like a little bit better because I got to get into brights, and I love that Mesoamerican teal, yellow, orange, purple combinations there. So this one didn't turn out as bad, but that is again really tiny and not a lot of detail. This one's so tiny I couldn't even get an in-focus picture of it. So this is a little 28mm scale sword in a stone, and maybe used for a diorama someday. Not really sure. These were 2 metal rats that I'm sure came in the Kickstarter, because I don't have or get a lot of metal miniatures, so it's rare for me to have them. But these two were in there and got painted up. And here is, if you've seen the other two series, here is a Muscle Man toy from the 90s. I don't know what BH stands for, but it was the 90s, so maybe bullet hole. He's got a hole in his head. That's crazy and dark and who knows, but it was a weird time, and toys, it was a weird time for toys. But Muscle Man with strange hole for a head. Another one I like using the bright colors on. So now we're moving in towards personal projects that I did for holiday gifting, and this one I really like because this was a little set of 3, and you'll see in the next 2. But the three wise men here, this one actually in the packaging, the arm had broken off, and there wasn't in the packaging. So this is actually a very simple kit bash of that arm that I glued on is actually from a zombie miniature, the same zombies that I used in the base for the zombie Captain America. And so anyway, they turned out really good, and I repurposed them. So I filled in the ornament strings in the heads, and touched up the paint, because the paint was not at all close to the lines, and that's saying something since I'm still struggling to paint in the lines. But I like how the colors, when I repurposed them, ended up looking more like fabric than they did when they started, so that was good. And then this one, the third one, actually didn't have a face. His whole head and crown and everything was one big beard blob on the top of the head. So now he's got a face, and probably works a little better seeing where he's going there. We did some of these are braziers, not entirely sure how to say that, but they're again from Terrain Crate, and they're the first time that I did a technique with the toothbrush where you flick the bristles in it, and it gives kind of that spattering of color, and it worked awesome for these kind of half-lit coals. Alright, so this guy is the Neon Pink Barbarian. He started as a Hero Clicks toy that had the base removed, and he was also for one of our challenge videos, and this one was the speed paint, and kind of a lucky draw for the speed paint one, because as you can see, I pretty much painted him flesh tone, and then a wash for the muscles, and then the neon pink shorts. So that was a very fast speed paint, a good miniature to draw for that one. These next 3 are the Ninja Bread Men, and these are made from scratch, from clay, to look like actual cookies, and I think that was captured in this. The bases are just the same thermoset plastic bases you guys see me pour in videos all the time, and then they're painted, so I really like how the painting turned out on these guys. So you've got the one flying through the air, and then this one kind of kicking kung fu style, and then you've got this guy on the multicolored base there. This one ended up, he's supposed to be in some sort of like deep lunging martial arts stance, but I think he ended up more looking like he was carrying a football, so who knows. But the 3 wise men were a gift for my mom, and the 3 Ninja Bread Men were a gift for my sister and brother-in-law. And then we've got probably one of the most favorite miniatures that I've done so far. For one of the most recent challenges, we did a cosplay, which we drew the random mini out, and it was this orc shaman, and the cosplay character that he was decided to be is Pixie from the X-Men. And so the neon pink hair and the black and yellow uniform just really kind of fell into place really well on his in his robe there. Pretty entertaining. I really liked how that one turned out, and I really liked how this next one turned out. This was one of the first attempts at a little miniature diorama. This is the one I did for my dad, and this started as a plain plastic dollar store toy, and the bottom is a kind of a plastic token, and it just turned out really great. I like how the crystals, I washed them in the blue-green and then washed them with neon pink, and I got this kind of amethyst set of colors. Really happy with how these turned out, and if you compare them to the miniatures at the beginning of the month, I'm starting to finally be intentional about some of the beginning techniques that we're trying out. And then you guys actually, since for those of you that stayed to the end of the video, you actually get spoilers for when we do challenge videos. In this case, the cosplay one. I'm doing second videos for the Patreon supporters. Absolutely can't do it without you guys. The Patreon and the Buy Me a Coffee supporters really are a big help. And so, but you guys watching this video, if you stayed till the end, are getting to see the piece that I painted up for the Patreon supporters, which was a little plastic toy that I, in the cosplay, followed up to be Hitmonkey. And so so thank you for staying to the end of the video, and you're getting a sneak peek because the 30 minis in 30 days ends before that next 3 videos it takes for that Hitmonkey to be public. So you're kind of at the very end of this video sneaking a little peek at the piece I did for the Patreon folks. But these 30 days videos are meant to be accountability for me and to keep a complete record, to show everything that I've been working on, so that it's not just the polished piece or two. It's all the in-between stuff, and I want you to see that I'm messing up and making a mess every time I do anything. But I want you guys to get to be along for that, and thank you for watching. If you like the content, you can go ahead and like and subscribe, and the Patreon and Buy Me a Coffee links will be in the descriptions. So we'll see you in a couple of days for another video, and we'll see you in a month for hopefully another 30 days. Go for 4 in a row. Thanks, Internet.